Huge news for 2026 have just come out. The oven. Mercedes and Red Bull are reportedly going to have a super overpowered engine for the next season, and the rivals are not thrilled about it. Over the last few days, the internet has been bursting with new rumors and new confirmations from the FIA and the teams, and it's all around this one issue with the new overpowered engines, and all of this is happening during Christmas time. So Merry Christmas everyone, and as a present to you, in this week's video I'll try to simplify and explain as much as I can what the heck is going on in the Formula 1 world to cause this ruckus just 2 weeks after the end of the season. And since gift exchanging is a two-way street, please give me your gift by leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel down below. So apparently Red Bull and Mercedes have found a cool trick that enables their engines to generate more compression over the allowed limit without it getting caught when the testing is done. So how does that work exactly? So let's start with the basics, shall we? First of all, the cylinder and the piston. The piston operates inside a cylinder and intakes air and fuel that are mixed up together. Then the piston goes up, compressing that fluid and air, and then igniting it, bursting up with energy, sending the piston down again, rotating the crankshaft, and that basically makes the car run. This is, in a very simplified manner, how a 4-stroke engine works, and in this video I will focus on the compression side of this cycle. In previous years, this compression had a limit of 18 to 1. What this means is that when you have a mixture of fuel and air, in this case let's consider 1 liter of mixture, and then the piston compresses it, it will reduce the volume by 18 times. So a mixture of 1 liter now becomes a mixture of 0.056 liter. In other words, you force the atoms to be very close together against their wheel, and that basically makes them very shaky. This is a really simplified way to explain it, but I think it helps visualizing what's actually more or less going on inside the cylinder. The instability generated by the amount of pressure caused by the compression makes the burn of the fuel be much more efficient, so that when it burns, it releases more energy, and therefore the engine becomes more efficient, therefore gaining some performance. Okay, this is very interesting and all that, it's a lot of cool engineering, cool chemistry, but how does this actually come into play here? Isn't this a limit that everyone has to follow? How are any teams going to go around it? Well, nothing is ever that simple, and I'm presenting you the way they compress it, but I'm really simplifying this because making it work in the real life is much tougher than it looks. And this limit of 18 to 1 was actually pretty hard to attain, so to make it easier for the newcomers, the FIA decided that the 2026 rules would have a lower compression ratio just to make it easier for everyone to be on the same level. So they decided to go to 16 to 1. And the FIA article where this rule is written doesn't only express the limit of 16 to 1 compression ratio, it also says the way it's going to be tested, and that's key for what we're about to see, because the wording on there just says that the test is going to be made with the engine static and at ambient temperature. And if you're a Mercedes engineer reading this, the thing that you're probably reading is none of the words that are there. You're just reading something along the lines of, as long as it complies with the 16 to 1 rule when it's stopped, then it's fine. So maybe they can go over it if it's working and not only static. And this is really cool because just in the last video we were talking about the plank and the skid blocks and how the teams exploited those areas of the car when performance was on the line. But things get even more interesting because it's all cool and well with having an idea, it's a completely different matter to bring that idea to life, because it's not so simple as just imagining it. You have to actually make the materials in the real world obey your will. So how did Mercedes do it? So they were the first ones starting to explore this idea, and they start playing around with the materials. The engine block, the cylinder, the piston itself, all the other materials around the engine, and they started experimenting with it and seeing what kind of results they got out of different materials, leagues of materials, and collecting a lot of data. Eventually, they found a formula that worked, that could expand with the heat in a way that could be advantageous for their engine, and that could basically reduce the volume of the cylinder and thus increasing the compression. This is achieved by the piston occupying a little bit more space than it used to when it's cold, and that reduces the internal volume of the chamber of combustion, and therefore it's said that the teams that are exploiting it, Mercedes and Red Bull, might be close to a level of compression of 18:1 back to the regulations that we had previously, and that gives them a very big advantage in performance. This might sound really easy to do because I'm basically oversimplifying it all, but the amount of data, the amount of trial and error, the amount of money that you have to put into a project like this takes a long time, and Mercedes are rumored to have spent over a year developing this concept. To get such a precise thermal expansion that's advantageous for your engine and that works with your design without putting in jeopardy the reliability, it's a truly amazing feat of engineering. By the way I'm describing it to you, maybe some of you are thinking that this was a big thermal expansion of the piston or some other component, but it wasn't at all like that, because if you don't know this about Formula 1, well, it's about time that you do, because Formula 1 isn't big on gaining through big changes. They are big on gaining through small changes, and that's on the details. The details, more often than not, decide major gains in performance. And in this case, they gained a whopping 0.5 millimeters. All of that work just so that their piston could be sitting 0.5 millimeters higher than the others when the engine is running. If you want to know how much or how little 0.5 millimeters actually is, grab 5 sheets of paper, stack them together, and there you have it. That's how much they have gained, and that's how much of a difference it makes in the Formula 1 world. Putting it in terms of performance, it means 10 to 15 extra horsepower, and in terms of lap time, between 0.3 and 0.4 seconds per lap. In Formula 1 terms, it's a hell of a lot. And Mercedes didn't do this like secretly, it was out in the open. They reached out to the FIA, they explained their vision, the interpretation of the rules, and basically the FIA didn't object to it. Later, Red Bull did exactly the same and got the same answer, so they were kind of cleared by the FIA. And if you've been paying attention, you're probably noticing that I'm always talking about how Mercedes did it, how they developed, but what about Red Bull? Didn't they achieve the same results? What are the odds of two teams stumbling on the same loophole? Well, pretty low, but they become a lot higher when you poach the right engine division. And the rumors are saying that Red Bull stumbled upon this loophole through ex-Mercedes personnel that they hired a while back. And we have no idea how long this happened, how much information were they able to provide to Red Bull, and how long did Red Bull actually have to develop this technology. All that we know for sure is that apparently Red Bull also managed to find the solution, or at least a solution, and reach the end goal of the same compression close to 18:1. Okay, so the theoretical advantage seems to be there and seems to be significant. So can't the other teams just do the same? What kind of impact will this have on the next season? As I hopefully made very clear, this is not easy to do. Mercedes took a long time, Red Bull probably took a good while to reach the same level, and basically for any other team to go through this route, they would have to scrap everything that they have done, redesign it all to work with the thermal expansion of these parts, and would take basically a whole new engine, a whole new project. And with 2 months to do that, because the engines have to be approved of their final version by March 1st, 2026, it's pretty much impossible for any other team to reach the same level as those two. So it's no surprise that Ferrari, Honda and Audi have presented a request or a clarification from the FIA regarding the compression ratio issue, and asking the FIA to intervene in some way to make this illegal, because they would be at a tremendous disadvantage. And this strong reaction shows 2 things. Number one is that the teams are actually very worried about the theoretical advantage that this little trick could cause them to be facing against the Mercedes and Red Bull engines. And number two is that they are so worried about this that they don't think they can overcome this in the short term. So they are kind of panicking, because the whole 2026 season would be basically pointless if they are so behind in terms of engine. So the FIA faces a really tough dilemma here. On one hand, they basically were aware of the Mercedes and Red Bull developments, they encouraged it, they didn't forbid them to pursue their issue, and the wording of the rules allow for this interpretation of the rules. So you can't say that Mercedes and Red Bull are on the wrong, because they checked if they could and they received pretty much a yes. On the other hand, the FIA needs to ensure a somewhat leveled playing field, and right now the field looks anything but leveled. The recent rumors point to a decision from the FIA to allow Mercedes and Red Bull to run their engines for 2026, with some further clarifications to come through to tackle the issue more clearly in 2027. And obviously the other rivals were not really happy about it, because they are basically stuck with this disadvantage for the whole 2026 season. But nothing of this is confirmed, and an official decision is yet to be made. Regardless of their decision, not all hope is lost for 2026, because there's another new feature coming into play for this new generation of cars, and this is called the Additional Development and Upgrade Opportunities, or ADUO for short. The FIA will monitor teams' internal combustion engine in 3 phases, from races 1 to 6, races 7 to 12, and then 13 to 18. And basically, if a team is down on power between 2 and 4%, they are allowed 1 homologation, or 1 upgrade, more or less. And if the teams are over 4% down, they are warranted 2 homologations for that season. So basically, if your team is really below in power, they are allowed to bring extra upgrades to compensate that difference. But is that going to be enough? Is that going to solve the problem? Can the teams actually find solutions to overcome such a massive difference? That remains to be seen, and only time will tell. But I'll say this: if you're in a Mercedes-powered car or in a Red Bull-powered car, you'll be feeling pretty good about your chances in the next season. And I'm sorry, Ferrari fans, last season was very painful, but I wouldn't be very optimistic for this one. And for Aston, even with Adrian Newey designing the car, it might not be enough. As a wise man once said,
you know, the last sector is impossible, so even if you put a rocket ship, we will be 11th.
So this is all for this week's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked it, leave your like down below and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next week for the next one.